Welcome to Economics 1B, which is the macroeconomic side of the subject of economics. So we want to look at some of the topics that we're going to be looking at in this particular module. So we understand that in the previous semester, we were looking at microeconomics for those that did Economics 1A, which looks at the individual elements within an economy. And now we are looking at Economics 1B, which is the macroeconomic side of the subject of economics. So we understand that economics can be branched into two. We have what is referred to as microeconomics, then we have what is referred to as macroeconomics. So just in a nutshell, to explain the macro and micro difference, we will use the circular flow of income and spending, as you can see on your screen, where you have the participants within an economy, the participants that form an economy. So we understand that an economy is a system of interdependent participants within an economy. And in an economy, in an economic system, we have participants in relation to the firms, the households, the governments, and what is referred to as the foreign sector. So these are what make up the economy. So the relationship between these participants would create what you refer to as an economy, as they interrelate to each other through demand and supply, through the needs and wants that needs to be satisfied from both ends in relation to each and every participant within that particular economy would create, in a nutshell, what you are referring to as an economy. So from each participant's point of view or participant's perspective, you can see that there are various endowments in terms of either resources or either elements within the economy that are being produced by that particular participant. For instance, if you look at the participant which we refer to as the households, we understand that the households are the owners of what we refer to as the factors of production. And it is these factors of production that are then used by the firms, which is the other participant, to produce goods and services which are required by the households as well. So you'd see that in that relationship, markets would then be created. That's why you have on the left-hand side, you have the factor market. On the right-hand side, you have the goods market. And in order to regulate the activities between these two, you'd find out that we have what we refer to as central planning, which is in actual state the government that comes into play in order to bring regulations, in order to bring laws, which we're going to be looking at in what we refer to as the public sector, and as well as the provision of certain goods and services that are not provided by either the households or the firms, which are of necessity in relation to the functioning of an economy. For instance, if you look at public infrastructure like roads, etc., which cannot be provided by private firms. So that would necessitate the creation of a government, which also provides security, policing services, and various ministries that it uses in order for it to produce these essential services to the economy. And in such a way, you'd find out that the government would introduce what we refer to as taxation in order for it to raise funding, in order for it to produce these various elements within the economy. All right, so in a nutshell, that explains what we are referring to as the economy. But in order for us to measure the performance of an economy, we use what we refer to as macroeconomic objectives. You'd find that there is a unit, I think that's the second unit on your study modules, that talks about measuring the performance of an economy. So when it comes to measuring the performance of an economy, we use what we refer to as the macroeconomic objectives, which are the objectives that are used in order to assess whether the economy is fully functional in its entirety. So the first objective is what is referred to as economic growth. The second objective is what is referred to as price stability. The third objective is what is referred to as full employment. Then we have external stability. Then we have equitable distribution of income and wealth. So these are the metrics that are used in order to assess whether an economy is fully functioning or whether the economy is underperforming in relation to its performance. So we're going to be looking at the first macroeconomic objective, which is economic growth. and we're going to subsequently look at other objectives later on. All right, so the first macroeconomic objective, which is economic growth, we understand that economic growth refers to the increase in real GDP over and above the previous year's GDP. So there is an important element there, which we are referring to as GDP. So GDP is a metric or a proxy that is used in assessing whether an economy is growing, or rather the performance of an economy in relation to how much has been produced. So by its definition, gross domestic product refers to the total value of all the final goods or services that are produced within the boundaries of a country in a particular period, which is usually a period within a space of a single year. So you'd find out that you'd be having GDP statistics provided by the central bank, which is the Reserve Bank of South Africa, or Stats SA, where they try to compile some of these figures in order for them to produce these statistics. So basically, we are trying to sum up how much value has been produced within the boundaries of a nation. For instance, in South Africa, how much each industry or each market is producing or is contributing to the sum total of the gross domestic product of the South African economy. So you can see that we have a chart there that we have, which we sourced from the World Bank, which indicates how much has been produced over a period of time from 1960 up until 2020, somewhere there, where you can see the performance of three economies, with Nigeria, with South Africa, with Cuba, and you're able to assess how much they were performing in relation to gross domestic product. And you can see that there is an upward trend, a general upward trend from 1960 to around 2010 in relation to gross domestic product, where South Africa had a total in 2019 of about 351.4 billion, that is in United States dollar perspective. So you'd see that in relation to that, that would be highlighting the general performance of an economy. So if we're saying an economy is growing, we're measuring the previous year's GDP with the current year's GDP, and we're able to see whether an economy is growing or is not growing. So for instance, if the previous year's GDP before 2019 was around 300 and it gets to 351, it means that the economy is growing. But if it was at 400, then it gets to 351. It means that the economy is not growing. All right, so let's just continue there. All right, so we want to look at methods that can be used to measure or to calculate gross domestic product. So in relation to methods that can be used to calculate gross domestic product, we have three methods. We have the production method, we have the expenditure method, then we have what is referred to as the income method. So the production method, basically sometimes referred to as the value added method, tries to sum up the value that has been added through the production phase or the production stages of a particular product, or the total products within the economy of South Africa. So, for instance, in the making of orange juice, you can see that the process starts from the growing of oranges. So from the growing of oranges to making a full orange, you can see that for each orange, there is an amount of value that has been added from having nothing to something. So that value that has been added is that which you consider when you are adding the value for gross domestic products. So for instance, from 0 to 1, the value that has been added there is a single dollar, and crushing the oranges into making it juice, the value changes from $1 to $1.50, because now it's juice, it's no longer an orange, and hence the value that has been added would be 50 cents. And you'd see that when we are now distributing the juices to the wholesalers, we are now having an increase in value, a subsequent increase in value at each stage, up until we have the final product that is sold in retail stores. So the summation of the value that has been added, which you can see on this particular columns here, would be added for us to get the amount of gross domestic product that will be calculated with along with other products. Remember, it's not a single product, but we're creating a sum total of what has been produced in the whole economy. Then secondly, we have what we refer to as the income method. So the income method basically measures the incomes that has been received by different factors of production. So we understand that factors of production, we have basically four factors of production. The first one is what is referred to as land or natural resources. Sometimes the word natural resources encompasses a lot. With natural resources, we have labor, we have entrepreneurship, then we have capital. So all of these resources, if they are made available within the factor market, they attract a certain remuneration in relation to each factor of production. And the main remunerations that are attracted to the different factors of production, we have wages, rent, interest, and profits. So for now, we want to ignore this because it's included later on, but we want to ignore that. That would be giving us the value of gross domestic product. So for instance, if you're to offer your labor skills within the factor market, you get into the labor market, you apply for a job, you do not apply for a job for nothing, but there is a particular salary that you know that you're going to be receiving for whatever service that you're going to be offering within that particular market. So that is ascribed to the wages or the wages and salaries that are received by the labor. Then for natural resources, mainly land, you find out that if you're to offer your land, what you would receive there would be rent, and that rent would be a sort of income that we add again to get the total value of GDP. Then if you're to offer your capital, capital attracts interest. So if you get into the financial markets and you're to offer your capital in one way or the other, you know that the main remuneration that you get from that is the interest, and the interest is part of the factors of production. Then if you're to start a business, combining the entrepreneurial skills that you have with your intelligence and the factors of production, etc., etc., you would get profits, and those profits are part of the factors of remuneration that the factors of production are getting. So the sum total would give us the gross domestic product. And last but not least would be the expenditure method. The expenditure method measures the value of GDP as the summation of the expenditures or the spending by the different spending elements within an economy. So within an economy, so in a two-sector economy, sometimes we use what we refer to as a two-sector economy, and sometimes we use what we refer to as a local economy, which includes the government. Then sometimes we refer to it as an open economy, which now includes the foreign sector. So in a two-sector economy with only firms and households, you find out that gross domestic product would only be a summation of consumption expenditure by the households and investment expenditure by the firms. But now when you are introducing the government into that economy, governments also comes with them with government spending on healthcare, spending on public infrastructure, spending on policing services, security services, and various activities that the government employs themselves within an economy. So you'd find out government spending would be an important element when it comes to the gross domestic product, because it will be also creating employment and people will be receiving incomes in the process. And at the end of the day, it will be creating some value to the economy. So that's why you see that we have government spending there. Then we have X minus Z. X minus Z represents exports minus imports. So exports basically represents the value that the economy would be exporting to other countries in either goods or services. So when you're exporting the wine from Cape Town, obviously you'll be expecting to receive remuneration, and that would be part, or that would encompass part of what we are going to be receiving within the economy. So hence it's part of gross domestic product. And we have a negative Z, which represents imports. Sometimes it may be an M, sometimes it's a Z. So you'd see that it's a negative because we are saying that when you're importing from other countries, it means that you are creating value for other economies rather than your local economy. So when you buy goods from Dubai, when you buy goods from China, when you buy goods from the United States, that would create value for those economies, and you'd realize that that would be creating employment for them. that would, at the end of the day, boost their economy. So that's why it's a negative, because it reduces the gross domestic product within the local economy. It shrinks the local economy. So basically, that is how we can sum up gross domestic product using the expenditure method. So C represents consumption and expenditure by households. I represents investment spending by firms. G represents government spending. X represents expenditure on exports. Z represents expenditure on imports. So sometimes we have gross domestic expenditure. So gross domestic expenditure would just be the domestic expenditure without including the foreign sector, which is imports and exports, where we only have C plus I plus G, which is in general consumption expenditure by firms, investment expenditure by firms, consumption expenditure by households, government spending, only as the three elements within the economy. So that would give us what we be referring to as gross domestic product. So sometimes you'd find that we have various variations in relation to gross domestic product. Sometimes with what we have when we are trying to measure certain aspects in relation to the beneficiation of an economy from its productivity. So with gross domestic product, we say that this is the value, total value of goods and services that are produced within the boundaries of a country. But sometimes we'd want to see how much the local citizens or the permanent residents are producing, regardless of their location. So sometimes we have local residents that reside in other countries, either in Australia, either in New Zealand, etc. So we want to sum up how much the local residents, permanent residents are producing in relation to productivity in general. So we use a metric that is referred to as gross national product. So gross national product sometimes, or rather referred to as GNP, refers to production resulting from employment of permanent residents of South Africa, wherever they might be, whether they are in the United States, whether they're in South Africa, etc. So basically, we're trying to aggregate how much they are producing in general. So with GNP, then we have GDP. So basically, we're showing the differences between the two. So with GDP, it measures only within the local economy. As you can see, within the boundaries of a nation, you might have different nationalities within that particular nation, and hence, as a result, we just aggregate for GDP, regardless of whether the nationalities from Poland, Thailand, or wherever it might be. As long as it is contributing to the local economy, we aggregate it as gross domestic product. Then with gross national product now, we only consider what the local residents or the permanent residents are producing or are receiving as income, regardless of where they are located, whether they're in the United States or wherever they might be. So we'd want to see the total value that they are producing. So basically, this is the difference between the gross national product and the GDP. So for us to calculate GDP from or gross national product from GDP, we are supposed to get the difference between what we refer to as income earned by foreigners and income earned by local residents in other countries, which we refer to as net factor payments. So you'd see that with income earned by foreigners in the local economy, they are subtracted from gross domestic product in order for us to have the remaining elements without including foreigners. And now we need to include what the other residents that are not residing in South Africa, that are residing in other countries, but which are permanent residents